Welcome to the Chattory with Jazz O'Brien. Jazz will take you on a journey through a wide variety of topics. Be ready to enjoy her passion for insight and knowledge. Please welcome your host, Jazz O'Brien. The podcast is starting in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Jazz O'Brien and welcome to the Chattory, the definitive compendium of conversation, insight and intrigue since 2022. The show that has a list of topics more diverse than my career aspirations. Everything about everything, or at least that's the goal. To coin the phrase, the Chattory is genre fluid. If you'd like to subscribe to the Chattory and help keep us ad-free, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Chattory and never miss a single thing. Membership benefits include everything from birthday shout-outs to newsletters to being able to get your hands on some Chattory merch. In a changed format, all contact details will be at the end of this episode. So, a big shout out to all listeners both in the UK and abroad, and wherever you're listening from, I hope that life is treating you very kindly indeed and that you're all ready for a brand new episode. This is the Chattory's first ever Halloween special, and I have to be honest, this is an episode where I got more than I bargained for. It's an episode which was inspired by a text message I received out of the blue. The text message contains several photos of, well, we'll come on to that all in good time. So, without further ado, let's lift the veil and hear what's coming up. First, we'll be looking at something called the stone tape theory. Secondly, and with the stone tape theory in mind, we're going to turn our attention to a real pile of stones, so a building that has dominated one village in Northamptonshire for over 200 years. Thirdly, we'll then be joined by a very special guest who, let's say, captured something mysterious on camera in the building that I've just mentioned, and whose photos were the initial inspiration for this episode. Fourthly, we'll use some modern and real ghost-busting equipment to try and get some answers as to exactly what our guest captured. And fifthly, ultimately, try to come up with some conclusion or explanation as to what on earth could be behind this whole saga and what, if anything, is the connection between a theory, a building and a set of photos. So guys, listen if you dare. So number one, the stone tape theory. Those who make it their day-to-day job or hobby to research and document reports of ghosts usually divide hauntings into at least two types. This may be simplifying things a bit, but generally they are residual or intelligent in nature. We'll come back to intelligent hauntings in due course, but for now, let's concentrate on residual hauntings. For these are usually linked in with the stone tape theory. What is a stone tape theory then? Have you ever heard of it? Well, what if natural materials could hold memories, like your house, for example, or the land it's situated on? What if a house or a bit of land could remember everything that's happened inside or on it? What if powerful events like a traumatic incident or major celebration or family secret was somehow remembered and so imprinted into the very fabric of a building or on that piece of earth itself? There are those who theorise that some ghosts and hauntings are a bit like tape recordings, and this is what the stone tape theory concerns itself with, that these powerful events generate such energy that they are locked in, as it were, just to replay and replay, for those who happen to be in the right place at the right time, or I suppose, depending on the event being replayed. So, for example, an unpleasant scene, the wrong place at the wrong time. Examples of the stone tape theory in relation to land sometimes come from battlefields. In America and during the American Civil War, 7,500 soldiers were killed in July 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. Many were buried quickly and without the proper rites, and many were forgotten entirely and without ever being honoured by reference to their name even. It's no wonder then that the area, which consists of fields, is said to be haunted by soldiers. For many years, visitors and residents of surrounding areas have reported seeing ghostly apparitions of soldiers, as well as hearing the cries of those wounded. Horses' hooves, gunfire, as well as Civil War era music and the sound of drums. Fields full of trauma and ex-battle sites in England have been the subject of similar reports. One infamous location is Edgehill in Warwickshire, which was the site in October 1642 of an English Civil War battle between the Roundheads, who were parliamentarians, and Cavaliers, who were the soldiers of the monarch of the time, King Charles I. A year later, and in 1643, a local pamphlet detailed how shepherds who had returned their flocks to the area had reported hearing the ghostly sounds of war. On the same note, and in relation to buildings, Hampton Court Palace, for example, in London, is said to be still home to two of Henry VIII's unfortunate wives. His third wife, Jane Seymour, who died in 1537 from the complications of childbirth, as well as Catherine Howard, who was executed in 1542 for adultery. Visitors and staff alike have reported over the years of seeing their apparitions, wandering the halls and grounds of the palace. Not interacting with visitors, however, but merely going about what seems to be a well-rehearsed routine. In fact, there are so many reported examples of the stone tape theory and buildings and land that it would take me the rest of the year to list them, I imagine. Charles Babbage was born on Boxing Day 1791 and was both a man of God and a man of science. He is credited as having first come up with the idea of a digital computer. He held a post as Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge University for a considerable period of time and is responsible for contributing to theories of economics still in use today, such as the Babbage theory. He was also instrumental in devising the Royal Astronomical Society as well as the modern postal system. Charles Babbage, I think it's uncontroversial to agree, was all in all a very clever and well-accomplished guy. In 1837, and at the age of 46, Babbage published a work on natural theology called the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise. Babbage speculated that spoken words leave permanent impressions in the air, even though they become inaudible after a time. He suggested that it's possible, due to the transfer of motion between particles, that these words basically stay forever in circulation. So, as I understand it, what Babbage was saying is that the spoken word produces a type of energy which never disappears. This, as far as I can see, is very similar to the stone tape theory. The stone tape theory could also actually be derived from the concept of place memory. In the early days of the Society for Psychical Research, place memory was considered an explanation for ghostly apparitions, seemingly connected with certain places. In the late 19th century, two of the Society's investigators, Edmund Gurney and Eleanor Sidgwick, presented views about certain buildings or materials being capable of storing records of past events, which can be later played back, they claimed, by gifted individuals. In the 20th century, the idea that objects can store and play back past events resurfaced in 1940. The then Psychical Research Society president, H. Price, theorised that psychic ether was an intermediate medium between spiritual and physical reality, which can enable objects to carry memory traces of emotions or experiences from the past between the two realms. British archaeologist turned parapsychologist or ghost hunter T.C. Lethbridge, it seems, agreed with these earlier theorists and supporters of the stone tape theory because he stated that he believed that ghosts were not spirits of the deceased, but were simply non-interactive recordings, similar to a movie. He claimed that past events can be stored in objects thanks to fields of energy that he believed to surround streams, forests and mountains. His 1961 book, Ghosts and Ghoul, popularised these theories, which allegedly could have inspired the creators of the 1972 BBC play, The Stone Tape. This is really in the 70s when the stone tape theory became more popular. In more recent years, and in their book, How to Think About Weird Things, Critical Thinking for a New Age, authors Theodore Schick and Lewis Vaughan dismissed the idea as an irrational claim. They said, and I quote, "The problem is that we know of no mechanism that could record such information in a stone or play it back. Chunks of stone just do not have the same properties as reels of tape." However, think of the many people who use crystals as part of a care or healing tool. Crystals are indeed stones, are they not? So following the stone tape theory, could they hold energy? Well, yes, is what those who use crystals subscribe to. However, scientists have stated that the healing power of crystals simply emanates from the minds of those who believe in them. So, imagine my surprise when researching this area a little further, I discovered that two brothers in the 1800s, Pierre and Jacques Curie, found that heating up crystals and exerting or putting pressure on them could produce electricity. Wow! Today, this technology is utilised by modern technology in things like microphones, lighters, watches, inkjet printers, as well as sonar and medical implants. The list goes on. Apparently, if you or I continually tapped on a crystal like a quartz for say half an hour, we would be able to produce an electrical voltage, and all using a rock. Curious or what? You know, I've read enough on ghostly happenings, and certainly over the recent days, to notice that a lot of those reporting paranormal activity and parapsychologists reporting the events all seem to agree that building or demolition, or in fact any kind of construction work, or the breaking up or disturbing of land often results in the sudden onset of ghostly apparitions, when previously there were none. Maybe the general disturbance the works have caused have, well, disturbed its ghostly inhabitants. Could this fact be related to the tapping on stone, which produces an electrical effect within a crystal? Stone tapping activates the stone to spill its secrets and play any recordings it holds. Is that right? Who knows? But I can't help to link all this information together with the interaction of humans plus natural materials having some kind of end result. The stone tape theory is also tied by some as to why places where horrible things have happened, like closed hospitals and mental asylums, make people so uncomfortable and scared, as well as being the sites of so much supposed ghostly activity. Have you ever gone into a building and liked or disliked its vibes? How many of you have bought or not bought a house, partly because of the good or bad feeling contained within its walls? Can science explain absolutely everything? Can we explain why we instantly like some people upon first meeting them and without knowing anything about them, or dislike some people at first sight without any logical explanation? If the walls and floors and staircases and ceilings of a house or building can literally remember the past and the trauma that has occurred within them, it stands to reason then that people could sense, hear, or even see that past, still looping and left behind to various degrees. So, while you mull over the stone tape theory, let's move from one discussion of stones generally over to a real pile of stones and collection of buildings situated in Northamptonshire, England. And that's what the second part of our discussion is all about. For our foreign listeners, or indeed anyone who's never been north of the Watford Gap, Northamptonshire, known as Rose of the Shires, is a county in the East Midlands of England and lies about 73 miles or so from London. It's landlocked by other surrounding counties, namely Warwickshire to the west, Leicestershire to the north, Lincolnshire to the northeast, Cambridgeshire to the east, Bedfordshire to the southeast, and Buckinghamshire to the south. Northamptonshire consists of many picturesque ancient villages. One of these villages is Weedon Beck. The name of the village, Weedon Beck, comes from the Old English Weedon and translates as Heathen Temple Hill. The Domesday Book of 1086 records the village's name as Weedon, and in the 12th century the village was renamed Weedon Beck after the village and monastery of Bec-Hellouin, which was in Normandy, France, and whose monks owned most of the village. Later still, and by an Act of Parliament in 1803, an ordnance depot was ordered to be constructed in the village. The Board of Ordnance, for anybody unfamiliar, was a British government body established during the Tudor period and had its headquarters in the Tower of London. Its primary purpose was to act as custodian of the lands, depots and forts required for the defence of the realm and its overseas possessions. After many years of war between England and France, the rise to power of Napoleon and the constant threats of the French to invade England caused the British government to take many precautions to defend the country. Many of the existing storage depots were near the ports in the south of England, and it was soon realised that these would be, well, obvious targets for any invading forces. So the board decided to build a new depot in the centre of the country. Weedon Beck was chosen because it was located at a crossing of the relatively new canal system with a major turnpike road. Canals and turnpike roads were recognised as being the two most efficient means of moving both men and materials at that time. Also, soldiers were used to marching, and it was regarded as an essential part of their training to march the turnpikes for miles at a time. Side note, for anyone unfamiliar, a turnpike road was what these days we would call a toll road. You know, a road where you have to go and pay a fee if you wish to cross it. Turnpikes or tolls are often in better condition and shape than an ordinary road, as it's effectively the upkeep you're paying for, obviously. Anyway, so the Weedon Beck depot and its building took place mainly between 1804 and 1816. The depot occupied 153 acres of land, and the original buildings included 8 storehouses, which were built on either side of a canal. The storehouses, which still stand today, are about 160 feet by 40 feet and have 4 large rooms each, so 2 up and 2 down, which are about 70 feet by 35 feet. There's a central lobby, which originally contained 2 staircases, but these days has only 1 staircase, plus an electric lift, which was installed around the start of World War II. From the storehouses, the canal that runs through the site continues to 4 magazines or storage areas, built half a mile to the west of the main buildings. There were 2 lodges, the East Lodge and the West Lodge. The East Lodge has a portcullis which closed the canal against unwanted intruders. The West Lodge had a similar portcullis, but the arch was closed by brickwork when the canal beyond was filled years later. This canal originally continued through this site to convey gunpowder to the magazine storage area. It's been stated by the Weedon Beck Historical Society that for several years following the completion of the depot, The officers on the upper level of the storerooms were probably used by the storekeeper, who was the man in overall control, whilst the small rooms on ground level were probably used by gatekeepers. These buildings were constructed to withstand blasts and are known as the blast houses. The small building on the right of the East Lodge was formerly a weighbridge office, associated with the rail access, which was formed following the moving of Weedon Station. The weighbridge with rail lines is still visible. The railway through Weedon was opened in 1838, and it may be that the wagon shed that once stood was provided in anticipation of bringing rail wagons into the depot. The white painted metal bridge over the canal, opposite the end of storehouse number 3, is what remains of a Schertzer rolling bridge. The idea behind this type of bridge was that a large tank was filled with water, which caused the bridge to lift and allow canal boats to pass. The depot included a barracks for a troop of horse artillery, which later became the Army School of Equestrian, a training centre for cavalry officers, if you like, whose horses occupied fields to the east and north of the main buildings. The site included houses known as the pavilions, which were built for officers and their families. The fact that wives and children would have called the depot their home is of importance soon, so remember that. The depot buildings have had many uses over the years. Between 1845 and 1870, 2 were used as a military prison and others as barracks. In more recent days, buildings were used to store small arms and ammunition. The depot brought new people to the village, job opportunities for tradesmen and demand for housing. For over 200 years, the fortunes and population of the village rose and fell with the changes at the depot. The site closed in 1965, with the land being sold off for housing, and the main depot was listed as a listed building. The site is currently, however, in private ownership, although it's open to the public with around 80 businesses operating within it. Harmon's Way and neighbouring streets now stand on part of the site, but the hitching posts for the horses can still be seen on Equestrian Way. So, what do we have so far then? Well, we have the stone tape theory and an idea as to what the Weedon Beck Ordnance Depot was constructed for, and some of its history and uses. And so, my friends, the scene is set. It's set for the third part of our discussion, and a very special guest who sent me the pictures that were initially the inspiration for this episode. So please give a warm welcome, guys, to our very special guest. Her name is Grace, and she's a long-time resident of Weedon Beck. Grace starts off by telling us a bit about herself and her plans during the summer of 2015 to rent out her existing coffee shop and open a new one up at the depot.
I moved from Hertfordshire to Weedon in 1994, approximately. We actually moved where the vet was, and then after that we moved to our house that we live at now.
Okay, and at this time, how familiar were you with the depot?
Not overly well. The only reason why I do have any contacts with the depot is in regards to, I think it was 2015, we were approached by one of the managers in the coffee shop at the time, and they asked us to be a part of the scheme that they were doing down there. So that they were renewing what they were doing down there, and they wanted a coffee shop, and they specifically wanted us. So after sort of sitting and discussing about it, we decided that if we'd gone down there, we could still rent the coffee shop out and then have a bigger unit down there and be a part of a new up-and-coming thing of the village, really. So, yeah, we said yes.
So we're in the summer of 2015, and you've decided that you're going to go up to the depot, have a look around with a view to opening a coffee shop up there. Can you remember what month this would be during that summer?
I can't remember. I think the month is actually on there, but I've got a feeling it was kind of late summer. So we were going up there, and we had several unit choices. It was all kind of dilapidated, but we chose one particular one, and I can't remember the unit number. But as Alex and I were up there, we sort of chalked out on the floors, and we were taking pictures just to see where we'd put stuff. And I think it was a couple of days later we found a crazy kind of discovery.
So Grace and her husband Alex are up at the unit at the depot, measuring up. They took some pictures, and I asked Grace what was behind the decision to take the pictures.
We were just taking pictures just so that when we got home, we could kind of say, right, this is where we're going to put this. Maybe we can divide this into this, and just make use of the space that we had.
Okay. And did you notice anything unusual about the building that day?
No, absolutely nothing at all. It was just an ordinary day.
When did you first notice something out of the ordinary about those pictures?
I'm going to say about 2 or 3 days after, when I kind of zoomed in for the window space, because I thought, right, how do we divide such a large window space into a utility space, or a utilised space? And then I saw lots of orbs. So I kind of zoomed into the orbs, then I zoomed in closer, then closer again. And then I showed Alex, and I was like, what does that look like? And Alex was like, oh my God, wow. So yeah, it kind of went from there.
At this point in time, I'm going to flip back to the day that Grace sent me those pictures whilst I was on the train home from work one evening a few weeks ago. And I have to say, as soon as I clicked on the photos, they took my breath away because of what is unmistakably in the picture. You and I have not discussed what is in the picture, Grace. So you tell me, what do you see in the picture?
I can clearly, distinctively see a face. I think I can see a dog. And it's somebody peering around, which on that side of the building is a balcony.
And I have to say, that's clearly and distinctively, as Grace says, exactly what I see when I look at the picture. It looks like a man peering around a corner, can clearly see his face shape and his hair, and as Grace says, what looks to be a small dog at the bottom of the picture. And that's not all. There were also some other pictures that Grace's husband Al took using his phone that day. I asked Grace what she could see in the other pictures.
I think I can see kind of children. There is one thing that I zoomed in, one specific bit that I zoomed in, and I can see it's almost a face, but there's lots of stuff that we can see in this particular picture. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I have to say, looking at the pictures, I can see exactly what Grace means. And it's interesting, isn't it, that later research uncovered that the wives and children of the officers would have indeed lived on the base. I asked Grace if she thought that the photos were photos of actual ghosts or tricks of the light.
I think it's a ghost.
Definitely,
most definitely, yeah.
I asked Grace if she believed in ghosts and if she had any previous encounters she wanted to share.
I do believe in ghosts. I think we lived in Hertfordshire, and we lived on the end of a road where there was a cemetery and the co-op funeral service. And I've very many vivid memories of things happening. And when I first met my now best friend, it was my birthday. And we can both see the same thing at the same time, and it was somebody in the window. And since that encounter, we've been best friends for the last sort of 40 years. So, yeah, definitely.
And have you been back to the depot at all since you took those pictures, Grace?
Many times.
And have you seen anything else there?
No, I've took many pictures again, on the hopes of catching something. I think Brogan did a boxing club up there for about 7 or 8 weeks, and I used to take her up there and pick her up in the evening. And I did make a habit of kind of walking around with the camera and taking stuff. But again, we looked in and we didn't see anything. So yeah. maybe it was just one of those particular pictures in that particular frame of time.
So despite going up to the depot many more times over the years and walking around with a camera while her daughter was at boxing club, Grace has never seen anything else up there. We have our understanding of intelligent hauntings as well as the stone tape theory. We've heard about the Weedon Ordnance Depot and its history, and we've heard our guest's account of the photos she took up there. So this is the point, guys, where, as promised, I'm going to whip out that real life bit of equipment straight out of Ghostbusters and go up to the depot in order to see if I can contact any signs of lingering energies from times and days gone by. It's time, folks, to pull out the spirit box. And this, part 4 of our discussion today, is going to take your breath away. What is a spirit box? Well, a spirit box takes many forms, but its physical form, rather than an app, looks like a portable radio, and apparently it's the #1 tool for Ghostbusters. The spirit box scans AM and FM frequencies, looking for verbal communications from spirits. A real radio will scan a frequency and then stop when, for example, it hits a radio station. A spirit box has this bit removed, so it won't stop when it hits some recognisable noise. It will just play it and keep scanning. The spirit box can probably be credited to Frank Sumption, an inventor, and comes from about 2002. Frank was an amateur paranormal researcher who theorised that spirits could be contacted in real time with the assistance of a modified radio, an AM receiver. The spirit box is probably the modern day Ouija board, I would say. A cursory search on that well-known online shopping site reveals that a physical spirit box can cost hundreds of pounds, even at the cheapest end of the scale. So, in the interest of keeping costs down, I decided to download an app onto my phone that does the same thing. As I downloaded the app onto my phone, the old thing, pareidolia, sprang to mind. One of the biggest criticisms facing the modern day spirit box is the fact that humans are creatures of habit, that look for patterns or commonalities in anything we do. We also like to make sense of abstract things and convert them into things that we recognised. This is the case for the phenomenon known as pareidolia. Have you ever looked up at the clouds and thought that they look like a whale or a dragon? Have you ever seen a curry or piece of toast that looks like a human face? Both are perfect examples of pareidolia, which is the human tendency to take vague shapes and objects, and indeed sounds, and turn them into something that is easily recognisable. This is something I acknowledged we'd have to bear in mind in cranking up and analysing anything coming through on the old spirit box. For after all, I'm only human. So, to add spook to the situation, I thought it was only fair I should go to the depot after dark. Since the gates were closed and accessing the site would be trespass, I decided to squeeze myself up as close to the gates as possible. Switch the box on and let the session roll. I had researched how to word myself, and all advice clearly advised to give respect to any interviewees on the other side, as it were, both before the session and also at the end. My plan was to ask a series of simple questions to try and find out if there was anything intelligent at the depot, or whether we're talking stone tape situation, or maybe nothing at all. Some of the questions I intended to ask more than once to see if I got a response. Would it be the same response each time? But first, based on my research, there was something I had to do. I took the guidance on how to conduct such a session very seriously. The advice clearly stated to say a little prayer and ask for protection before starting any session. Not wanting to go against this valuable advice, I did just that. I recited the only prayer that I knew off by heart, and one that I imagine all religions have an equivalent of. It could have been any prayer in any religion. Protection was the important thing. Also, I didn't want to cut corners and so went for the whole unabridged version. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive those as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I ask for holy and divine protection, and that anything that communicates with me stays here at the depot when I leave. My God, I literally have the hair standing up on the back of my neck before we've even started this thing yet. So, on a windy, dark, dank and damp October night, I stood there with the dog and cranked up the spirit box. The following is what I picked up. Thank you in advance for anyone wishing to come forward to partake in this interview. Is there anyone here who wishes to talk with me? If there is, can you communicate by talking into this machine in my hands? What's your name? Are you male or female? Are you male or female? Why are you still here? Who was in that picture that Grace took? Who was in the picture that Grace took? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? How long have you been hanging around here? What's your name? Is there any message you want me to know? Who is that in the picture that Grace took? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? How long have you been hanging around at the depot? Is there a dog in that photo? What was the dog's name? What was the dog's name? What was the dog's name? Who were in the pictures that Al took? Are you a child or an adult? Why are you still hanging around here? Is there any message you want me to know? Or does anyone want to say anything else? Who was in that picture that Grace took? What's your name? Do you want me to go away? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? Is there any message you want me to know, or does anyone want to say anything else? Were you a soldier or a storeman? Okay, well, thanks for your help. Thanks for talking to me. That night when I was up at the depot, I couldn't really hear what was being recorded. The passing traffic, as well as trying not to look too strange hanging about the gates, was a bit of a distraction. As I wrapped up the session and walked away from that great big imposing sight, I replayed the session through my headphones. And then I ran, and the dog ran, and I didn't stop until I was back home and behind my very firmly locked front door. There are those who believe that if you slow down the recording I've just played, then the messages from the spirit box are easier to hear and understand. I'm not sure what device you're using to listen to this podcast, but most, whether it be your phone, Alexa or computer, will allow you to slow down that portion of the episode if you want to do that, and if you find it helpful to listen in slow motion. However, I didn't need to. For me, 2 messages definitely were crystal clear and, to be honest, for me, a standout. I'm going to replay the portions where there was definitely some kind of decipherable message, and I'll let you know which ones I mean when I say the 2 standout messages. So here we go. The first is when I'm introducing the session and explain how energies should interact with the spirit box. As I'm still talking, I'm sure that whatever it is talks over me and says it can see. Thank you in advance for anyone wishing to come forward to partake in this interview. Is there anyone here who wishes to talk with me? If there is, can you communicate by talking in? Did you hear that? I can see. The second bit is the first time I ask for a name. There's definitely a response. What does it say? Zachary, maybe? I'm not sure. Here it is again. What's your name? The third thing and the first standout moment comes when I initially asks, why are you still here? Can it be that the response that comes back to me is, because you called me? Have a listen. Why are you still here? The fourth bit of the recording comes when I ask how long the energy has been hanging around at the depot. I asked this a few times. The first response sounds like 3, and the second response sounds like it's saying 300 years, which would take us back to roughly 1722. This is curious because 1722 is about 84 years before the construction of the depot started. How long have you been hanging around here? How long have you been hanging around at the depot? The fifth interesting excerpt comes when I ask who was in the picture that Grace's husband took. The response I get back, I think it says Alf. Let me play it. Who were in the pictures that Al took? Are you a child or an adult? Curious, because both Grace and I agreed that the picture seems to show a female or young woman. The accent to me sounds German as well, which again is curious. I do speak some German, and the closest word I know to Alf is elf, which translates as 11. However, a cursory search of the translation of Alf from German to English on the internet reveals that Alf is actually an abbreviated version of Adolf. Curious, because I wonder whether there were any World War II soldiers being held at the depot from Germany. Prisoners of war, if you like. The sixth and second of the standout recordings I seem to pick up is when I ask if the energy would like me to leave. Am I mistaken, or does the response say, "Leave, you fool"? Again, I think I hear the same message a few seconds later of "Leave, you fool." Here we go. Do you want me to go away? Did you want Grace to take a picture of you? As I was walking away from the depot, I took some pictures of the gate I was squeezing myself up against whilst I recorded the session. Most of the time and throughout the session I was holding on to the gate. It was only when I zoomed in on those photos later on I noticed something invisible to the naked eye. Could it be the image of a young boy with a fringe and some sort of flat cap on, pressed up against the opposite side of the gate? All pictures I've referred to in this episode are up on the Chattory.com website, so head on over there to take a look and make your own mind up. So, on to the fifth and final part of our episode today, which is there any connection between the stone tape theory, the depot and the pictures that Grace took? Well, what can I say? In connection with the stone tape theory, I think it's definitely possible. If it does exist in reality, it means that as you walk down your hallway tonight or in through the front door, your presence may be imprinted on the home and felt by someone far in the future walking down that same hallway or coming through that same front door. The very walls and fabric of that building recording a permanent trace of your existence. Science has not yet proven this theory, and therefore it remains unproven. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It could be one theory behind one type of manifestation or feeling that some people get when they enter a building or suddenly get goosebumps while sat there with the heating on full blast. When I think about rocks or natural materials holding energy, I can't help but think about the way the sun warms a rock or a house or indeed anything that's in its path. Granted, once the sun goes down or weakens in strength, the energy from the natural object disappears. I'm definitely no scientist, and I guess the only tangible thing I'm left with on this point, apart from the millions of people who over the centuries have reported watching unearthly scenes play out in front of their very eyes, is Albert Einstein's theory that everything is energy and that's all there is to it. This is not philosophy, it is physics, and that's a direct quote from Albert Einstein. Whatever I caught on the spirit box up at the depot was definitely more intelligent than stone tape theory. But as for the pictures that Grace and Al took in 2015 and that I took 7 years later in 2022, the cameras have definitely captured something needing further scientific investigation and explanation. Stone theory or intelligent, who knows? Tricks of the light, camera flares, or indeed any other worldly explanation is beyond me. However, what I do know is that those photos definitely contain images which bear distinct and striking similarity to a man and his dog, a child and a young man, to more than one person who's seen them. Yet to others they see nothing. You tell me. What about the spirit box then? I wish I could say that I couldn't decipher any answers or intelligent response, but the problem is I think I can. Are the things I thought I heard open to interpretation? Of course they are. Would I go back and try and contact any energies there again? Probably not, in view of the fact that until someone tells me different, the message for me to leave more than once came over clearly. Ultimately, I think the site, as well as its history, needs more investigation with some high-tech equipment and a thorough understanding of the site that would take months and possibly years to get to the bottom of. However, I would say that there is something behind the elements we've discussed this evening. I don't need to prove it within this episode, and that would be impossible. I know that there are those on the other side, behind that veil. How do I know? Well, let's just say that that would be a story for another Halloween. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, I'd very much appreciate it if you could leave me some stars and even better, a written review on whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. So from me, your host, Jazz O'Brien, thanks for tuning in, and please feel free to reach out with any comments, feedback, suggestions for topics or future episodes, or anything at all that you'd like to share. As always, if you'd like to reach out and join in the conversation, then please email me on jazz@thechattory.com or drop me a WhatsApp message or voice note on 07506 704 705. Of course, if you're calling from outside the UK, you'll need to put in the country code for the UK, which is +44. Alternatively, head over to thechattory.com and you can get all the contact details on the Chattory website. The Chattory, the definitive compendium of conversation, intrigue and insight since 2022.
Thank you so much, guys and girls, for listening to The Chatter with Jazz O'Brien. Follow us on thechattory.com and never miss an episode. Join the conversation by dropping us a WhatsApp message, question, or voice note, or email jazz@thechattory.com. Till next time.